You can say if it's smart or if it's not smart, what can the captain do?
They are trash. Those are the words echoing through golf circles after Team USA's 15-13 defeat at the 2025 Ryder Cup at Bethpage Black. But the most damning assessment didn't come from fans or journalists. It came from Paul Azinger, the last US captain, to actually win on home soil back in 2008. And after months of silence, Azinger has finally broken his silence with a scathing diagnosis of exactly what went wrong. This wasn't just a loss on the scoreboard. This was a complete organizational failure. So what did Azinger see that everyone else missed? Let's break it down. The final score was 15-13. Europe defended their trophy. America lost at home, again. But here's the thing. The score doesn't tell the real story, because what dominated the headlines wasn't the golf. It was the absolute chaos that surrounded it. Bethpage Black turned into a hostile war zone. European players like Rory McIlroy and Shane Lowry faced non-stop heckling. Fans were shouting during their swings. Drinks were being thrown. Verbal abuse was aimed not just at the players, but at their families too. This wasn't passionate support. This was something darker, something that crossed the line. And the PGA of America? They completely lost control. Former US captain Tom Watson publicly stated he was ashamed of the rude and mean-spirited behavior. He even felt compelled to apologize to the European team. Think about that. A legendary American captain apologizing for American fans. That tells you everything about how bad things got. Now here's where it gets interesting. The PGA knew what they were getting into. Bethpage Black has a documented history of rowdy crowds during US Opens and PGA championships. This venue is famous for uncontrollable fans. So why choose it for the Ryder Cup? Simple. Money and spectacle. They wanted maximum ticket sales. They wanted the media-friendly narrative of using a public course. They prioritized hype over actually creating a fair, competitive environment. And it backfired spectacularly. The home advantage became a cultural liability. The atmosphere became so toxic that it actually hurt Team USA's chances. So before we go any further, drop a comment below. Do you think the PGA made a mistake choosing Bethpage Black? Or was the fan behavior just out of control, no matter where they played? Let me know what you think. And if you're new here, hit that subscribe button, because we're diving deep into what really went wrong. Now let's talk about leadership, or more accurately, the complete lack of it. Paul Azinger didn't hold back when discussing Captain Keegan Bradley. Azinger said Bradley was put in an unfortunate spot, and the people that put him there should know better. That's not just criticism. That's a direct shot at the PGA of America's decision-making process. So what was wrong with Bradley? Two major problems. First, Bradley was ranked 11th in the standings during the 2025 season. He was playing great golf. He even won the Travelers Championship, but he had to step aside to focus on being captain. That means the US team knowingly fielded a lineup without one of their top 12 players. They handicapped themselves from the start. Think about the internal conflict this created. Bradley is watching from the sidelines while his teammates compete. He knows he could be out there contributing points, but instead he's forced to choose between personal ambition and leadership responsibility. That's an impossible position to put someone in, and it shows a fundamental misunderstanding of what the Ryder Cup demands. You need a captain who is fully committed to leadership, not someone torn between two roles. The Europeans don't do this. Their captains are retired players or those clearly past their competitive prime. They can focus entirely on strategy, pairings, and team psychology without the distraction of wondering if they should be playing instead. Second, and this is huge, Bradley had zero experience as an assistant captain or vice captain. None. The PGA threw him into the deep end with no preparation. Why? Because he was a popular local name. Good for marketing, good for media content, terrible for actually winning. The organization chose narrative over competence. They wanted someone who would generate headlines, not someone who was strategically prepared to lead, and that decision cost them. Compare this to how Europe develops their captains. Luke Donald served as a vice captain multiple times before getting the top job. He learned the ropes, he understood the pressure, he built relationships with players over years, not months. That's how you create effective leadership. The US system treats the captaincy like a celebrity endorsement deal, rather than a critical strategic position that requires years of preparation and experience. But it gets worse, because the US team abandoned the one strategy that actually worked. Back in 2008, Paul Azinger did something revolutionary. He created the pod system, and it wasn't just some random idea. Azinger studied Navy SEAL team organization. He brought in psychological consultants. The concept was brilliant. He divided the 12-man team into 3 groups of 4 players. These pods ate together, practiced together, played together exclusively. But here's the key. Players weren't paired by golf style. They were paired by personality. Azinger wanted players who would run to each other under pressure, not away from each other. He wanted genuine trust and bonding. The psychology behind this is fascinating. In high-pressure situations like the Ryder Cup, golfers don't just need technical skill. They need emotional support. They need to know their partner has their back completely. When you pair players based on personality compatibility, you create bonds that can't break under stress. If one player hits a bad shot, the other doesn't judge or panic. They encourage, they reassure, they pick each other up. That's what Azinger understood. Golf is an individual sport most of the year, but the Ryder Cup is different. It requires a team team mentality that doesn't come naturally to most professional golfers. The pod system forced players to become genuine teammates, not just colleagues wearing the same uniform. And guess what? It worked. The US won at Valhalla 16.5 to 11.5. It was a dominant victory built on psychological cohesion. Fast forward to 2025. That system, gone. Completely abandoned. The team operated without any of that proven structure. No pods, no personality-based pairing, no psychological framework, just a conventional approach that had failed time and time again. This is what Azinger calls organizational memory loss. The PGA forgot what actually works because they were too focused on doing things the way they've always been done. Leadership matters more than lineups. That's Azinger's core message. You can have the 12 best golfers in the world, but without proper structure and psychological preparation, you'll lose every single time. And then there's the LIV Golf situation. Azinger was brutal about this. He specifically called out the exclusion of Brooks Koepka. Azinger said there was no way Koepka wouldn't man up and play great at this Ryder Cup, but he wasn't even selected. Why? Ideology. Politics. The US team sacrificed competitive strength to stay aligned with the PGA Tour. Meanwhile, what did Europe do? They were pragmatic. Captain Luke Donald brought in LIV players John Rahm and Tyrrell Hatton. And guess what? Those two were already teammates on LIV's Smashers team. They had existing chemistry. They formed what Azinger called a brilliant pair. Europe leveraged that synergy for immediate competitive benefit. America? They left proven match play talent on the sidelines because of organizational politics. In an event decided by razor-thin margins, that's unforgivable. The US wasn't fielding their best 12 players. They were fielding 12 players who fit their political narrative, and they paid the price. Now, let's talk about the course itself, because this is where the home advantage was completely wasted. Azinger made his feelings crystal clear. He couldn't stand Bethpage Black as a player. He cited specific architectural problems, awkward angles, downhill tee shots to fairways that angle away, uphill second shots where you can't see the landing area. These aren't minor complaints. These are fundamental design issues that make the course difficult to master. But here's the deeper problem. Azinger claimed the US players don't love and don't know this course well enough to have a real advantage. A true home advantage requires deep familiarity and psychological comfort. Neither existed at Bethpage. The decision to use this venue was driven by fame and media appeal, not strategic advantage. But it gets even worse. Jim Furyk confirmed that key course setup requests from the US team were not met. The team asked for less rough. They asked for firmer greens. Neither request was honored. When the team arrived, the greens were really soft because of rain and setup issues. Why does that matter? Because soft greens completely negated the competitive edge of US players who rely on controlling distance and spin into firm surfaces. Soft conditions played right into the hands of European players who are more comfortable with receptive greens. Think about that. The US couldn't even control the conditions on their own soil. The PGA of America prioritized maintaining Bethpage's reputation as a fearsome championship test over tailoring it to give their own team an advantage. That's a strategic blind spot of the highest order. Home advantage wasted. But the cultural breakdown goes even deeper. And this is where Azinger delivered his most pointed critique. He called out the double standard. Yes, Rory McIlroy endured extreme heckling from fans. That's inexcusable. But McIlroy also reportedly engaged in vulgar conduct toward the crowd, including a retaliatory gesture that he said felt pretty effing good. Azinger's response? McIlroy can't do both. You cannot demand that golf be held to a higher standard of etiquette while simultaneously resorting to vulgarities and trying to lay the fans to waste. When a professional player retaliates, they endorse the toxic atmosphere. They signal to fans that aggression is acceptable on both sides. The traditional professional distance collapses. Azinger insists that leadership from the PGA down to the players must set the example of restraint. When even the top players lose self-control, it underscores just how deep the cultural crisis runs. This double standard problem reveals something troubling about modern golf culture. We've reached a point where everyone wants to be the victim and the aggressor at the same time. Fans want to heckle and abuse players, then complain when players respond. Players want to engage in trash talk and gestures, then demand respect and decorum from spectators. The PGA wants to create a wild, energetic atmosphere to drive ticket sales and viewership, then acts shocked when things get out of control. Everyone is pointing fingers at everyone else while contributing to the problem. This is what happens when you lose sight of core values. Golf has always been different from other sports. It's built on honor, integrity, and self-regulation. Players call penalties on themselves. Spectators remain silent during shots. There's mutual respect between competitors even in the heat of battle. But the modern Ryder Cup is abandoning all of that in pursuit of being more like other sports. More entertainment, more drama, more controversy. And in the process, it's losing what made it special in the first place. And what's fueling this crisis? Commercialization. The modern Ryder Cup is drowning under the weight of excessive financial pressure and marketing saturation. Broadcast coverage was dominated by what viewers called massively excessive commercials. The flow of match play was constantly disrupted. Meanwhile, the on-site environment at Bethpage was defined by aggressive corporate activations. DraftKings created an ultimate man cave. Crypto.com had major branding everywhere. The event was marketed as a high-octane spectacle of consumption and betting. This kind of atmosphere naturally encourages the rowdy, aggressive fan culture that Azinger and Watson condemned. When you prioritize hype and revenue over integrity and tradition, you get exactly what happened at Bethpage. Chaos, disrespect, a complete erosion of golf's core values. The Ryder Cup is trading integrity for short-term commercial gain, and that's a dangerous path. So what does Azinger want? What's his vision for fixing this mess? He laid out 3 clear mandates for the PGA of America. First, leadership over hype. Future captain selections must prioritize proven strategic acumen and extensive experience in assistant or vice captain roles. Leadership cannot be a ceremonial or political appointment. It must be purely strategic. Azinger reinforced this when he said the people who put Bradley in that position should know better. The captain needs to be someone groomed for the job, not someone chosen for media appeal. Second, respect over rivalry. The PGA must immediately establish non-negotiable standards of decorum for both players and spectators. Zero tolerance policies for vulgarity and abuse enforced rigorously. Azinger was clear, you can't say fans need to behave better and then lay them to waste. Players must lead by example. The integrity of the sport must supersede the spectacle of rivalry. Third, strategy over spectacle. Venue selection and course setup must prioritize maximizing the U.S. team's competitive advantage. Commercial popularity must be secondary. Analytical feedback from players about green firmness and rough height must be honored. The home advantage was wasted at Bethpage because the PGA cared more about the venue's prestige than tactical needs. That can never happen again. The public response to Azinger's critique has been polarized. Some in the golf community praised his honesty and strategic clarity. They called him legit. Finally, someone with credibility speaking truth to power. But others dismissed his criticism as bitter or overly negative. This split reveals a deeper problem within golf culture. There's resistance to change. People want victory, but they reject the hard structural reforms necessary to achieve it. The PGA of America faces a critical choice. They can treat Azinger's critique as data-driven imperatives. They can dismantle the culture of complacency. They can prioritize competitive integrity over spectacle, or they can dismiss this as noise from a traditionalist and continue down the same path. If they choose the latter, expect more losses, more controversy, more embarrassment. The pattern is clear when you look at recent Ryder Cup history. The U.S. has now lost 9 of the last 12 matches. That's not bad luck. That's systemic failure. Europe has figured out a formula that works. Strong leadership, careful captain selection, personality-based team building, strategic course management. Meanwhile, the U.S. keeps reinventing the wheel every 2 years. New captain, new approach, no institutional memory, no consistency. It's like watching a company fire its entire management team after every quarterly report and wondering why performance never improves. At some point, you have to stop blaming individual captains or players and start looking at the organizational structure itself. That's what Azinger is forcing the PGA to confront. This isn't about Keegan Bradley failing as a captain. It's about a system that sets captains up to fail by not giving them the tools, experience, or support they need to succeed. And here's what makes this especially frustrating for American golf fans. The U.S. has the talent. They have the best players in the world. They have the resources. They have the home course advantage in their own matches. They have everything they need to dominate this competition. But they keep losing because they refuse to learn from their mistakes. They refuse to adopt proven strategies. They refuse to prioritize winning over spectacle and marketing. It's like having all the ingredients for a perfect meal, but refusing to follow the recipe because you think you know better. Then acting surprised when the dish turns out terrible. How many more losses will it take before real change happens? How many more humiliating defeats on home soil before the PGA admits their approach isn't working? The significance of Azinger speaking publicly after months of silence cannot be overstated. He's declaring that the failures of 2025 aren't isolated incidents. They're systemic organizational problems requiring what he calls radical surgery. The failures in leadership selection, fan control, and course strategy are all correctable, but only if the PGA takes them seriously. The U.S. failure to use the pod system, to utilize their full player pool, and to control their home environment shows a profound lack of institutional seriousness about the Ryder Cup. Ahead of the 2027 match at Adar Manor in Ireland, the U.S. team has been handed a comprehensive evidence-based roadmap for reform. The ultimate question is whether the PGA of America will act on it. Because here's the bottom line. The 2025 Ryder Cup wasn't just a loss. It was a wake-up call. Paul Azinger, the last captain to win on American soil, has delivered a diagnosis that's impossible to ignore. Poor leadership, abandoned strategy, cultural breakdown, wasted home advantage, commercialization over integrity. These aren't excuses, they're facts. And until the PGA addresses them, the U.S. will keep losing. So what happens next? That's up to the leadership. Will they learn from this disaster? Or will they repeat the same mistakes in 2027? Only time will tell. But one thing is certain. Azinger has laid down the challenge. Now it's on the PGA to respond. If you made it this far, thanks for watching. Drop a like if you think Azinger is right. Subscribe for more deep dives into golf's biggest controversies. And let me know in the comments. Can Team USA turn this around? Or are we heading for more disappointment? I'll see you in the next one.